Well, hello.
Hello.
Welcome back. My name is Jennifer Childs. I am the producing artistic director of 1812 Productions.
And I'm Scott Greer, and you're welcome.
And as we have been saying every week, at this time we would usually be gathering in the theater, but because we can't do that, we are gathering around our dining room table to talk about comedy. And so grab
What are you drinking?
Oh, I'm drinking a mint julep because we got a mint plant yesterday.
We did. Everybody's buying plants today.
I know.
So in honor of the amazing Jilline Ringel, I am drinking a new concoction called the Ringle. Jolene identified as the 6-foot Amazon redhead from hell whom all men desire. The 6-foot
redhead Amazon.
Redhead Amazon from hell.
I'm interrupting the flow.
Yes. And she very often talked about her Italian and German heritage. So it is 1 part Galliano, 1 part cinnamon schnapps, and 3 parts Brazilian cachaça. In other words, to say cachaça, Kinshasa, of course, is a city in Pakistan. Cachaça, which is to say, worth it, totally worth it. Which is to say, it's German, Italian, and all Amazon.
Yeah, you're going to go all the way. It's going very well.
It's going very well.
One of the things that I talked about in the email that I sent out earlier today, and it's true, is so here we are in June. And at 1812 in June, our shows would be done, our fundraiser would be done, and we would be gearing up for the Jolene Ringel Solo Performance Program residencies. And the Jolene program is named after, as Scott was saying, Jolene Ringel, the self-proclaimed 6-foot redhead Amazon from hell whom all men desire. And so tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about solo performance. We're going to talk about Jolene. We're going to talk about her legacy. And we're going to talk about some of the way that the program is working. And over the next month, we are going to feature artists who have been through the Jolene program. I hate to tell you, I'm going to be doing a lot of the talking. Sorry.
You don't hate to tell me that.
Oh,
and I don't hate to hear that.
Yes.
This is as it should be.
Well, so for those of you who did not know Jolene, she was 6'2", actually. And I think she would hate the word zoftig or statuesque. We used to talk about myself as a 5' nothing person, and she as a 6'2" person. We would talk about, like adorable, how we hated it, statuesque, how she hated it. But she was a presence and a force to be reckoned with. And, here in Philadelphia now, there is such a culture of creating and performing and producing your own work.
The Solo Festival.
The Solo Festival, the Fringe Festival, all of the
devised
theater that has come through. But it wasn't always like that. So when we go back in the day, my friends, before there was a real, producing and creating your own work yourself scene here in Philadelphia, Jolene was sort of at the forefront of that. And I remember her talking about the fact that, going on auditions and having casting directors and people saying like, you're great, but we don't know what to do with you. Who's going to be your leading man if you're 6'2", or you're too much.
You can only do so many productions of Long Day's Journey into Night.
Yeah, exactly. You mean Moon for the Misbegotten?
Sorry, Moon for the Misbegotten. Yeah,
it's going very well. At any rate,
she wanted to play Tyrone in Long Day's Journey.
There you go. And I remember her saying like, well, you know what? I know what to do with me, and I'm going to create my own work. And she was an astonishing cabaret artist. Her cabarets, La Dolce Vita, which was her first one, which was movie songs from the 1960s, which was amazing. For Me, Formidable, French Made Easy, which is her French one, which I think she only did once. Shut Up and Kiss Me, which was all about being a bombshell. And
Come Fly With Me.
Come Fly With Me. And of course, Mondo Manja, which was her most famous one. And it was Mondo Manja. She would sing songs and tell stories about mostly the Italian side of her upbringing, and cook an Italian meal for the entire audience while she did it, and she would feed everybody at the end. And one of the things that I loved about that piece is she would come out and she would start by singing the Rosemary Clooney song, "Come On to My House." Come on to my house, better than that. And at the end, the audience would applaud, and she'd go, "You don't know me yet, and I don't know you, but you're in my house, so you're family." And that was just her invitation. Like, I feel like every show that she did, that invitation of like, you're here with me, you're family now. And her solo performances were full of spectacle, full of humor, but they were also really, really intimate in that way. And that was always really exciting.
I mean, the first time I saw her was she did La Dolce Vita for like the third time at Frangelica's, which is long gone, and it was on 12th Street in Center City. And Michael Ogborn, who Michael Ogborn has many times said that Jolene was his muse, and Michael Ogborn was her piano player. And only Jolene, one thing you have to know about Jolene is that she was formidably intelligent and like scarily smart and well read. She went to Bryn Mawr, and she she starts riffing in the middle of that show that I saw about Michael Ogborn being of Huguenot dissension, and she told like 6 jokes about the Edict of Nantes. And the one thing about Jolene is like you had to be on your toes. She was very kind and she was very funny, but she was always smarter than you. And super quick. Yeah.
So she would always start, one of the things that she would do also in Mondo Mangia is she would have the saint of the day, and she would read who the saint of the day was. And she always thought, oh, this is really funny because you can't make this stuff up. And so I thought, okay, well, tonight we will do, in honor of Jolene, we will do the saint of the day. So I looked up the saint of the day. And I have to tell you, Catholic Online, Wikipedia, and a whole bunch of other places, they all have very different saints. So I went in alphabetical order.
Wow.
Because she was also the most interesting, and it's a girl, and I like that. So, saint of the day, June 18th, Saint Alina. Born in Brussels in the 12th century to pagan parents whose names were Labold and Hildegard, with a T, not a D. She was baptized secretly, our Saint Alina, and went to Mass without the knowledge of her parents. I wish that was what my teenage daughter was doing, right? Okay.
Sneaking out to go to church.
When her father learned she was going to church, he sent guards to follow her and bring her home. She resisted them, and they pulled her arm off. She died in prison with Sans arm, but then an angel appeared and took her arm to the church where she had been worshiping. This caused, of course, a huge stir. There were several miracles reported at the time, and her parents were so amazed by this that they converted to Catholicism. And Saint Alina is now the patron saint of eye troubles and toothaches.
That checks out. I mean, sure.
Not armless.
No, I know. Not bursitis.
No. Exactly.
Yeah.
But toothaches. So next time you got a little pain in your tooth or you need your readers, pray to Saint Alina.
And thank Jolene.
And thank Jolene. That's great.
Mentioned a little bit about just her incredible presence and impact.
Yes, most definitely.
She was very popular in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. She was even more popular in Pittsburgh, where she had a standing gig
at the City
Theater for 3 months a year, which was usually late fall to December and the entire fall. And they would put up a billboard, and it was like 35 feet of Jolene reclining, and it said simply "On Vixen." Yeah. Like that. I mean,
and it was a local furniture company. Like, she was so well known in the theater, for crying out loud, that a furniture company featured her on a billboard.
Yes, she was also the Queen of Cape May, New Jersey.
Yes.
Where she actually developed a lot of her shows. She had I mean, she really did bounce around. Like she created work for herself and sustained herself by getting a 3-month gig every year in Pittsburgh, a 3-month gig every year in Cape May,
Philly.
And in Cape May. She would work at the Chalfont Hotel in the Henry Sawyer Room, which was a small little cabaret space, would seat about 75, and often they would jam in 90, and then she would hold court in the King Edward Bar, the King Eddie, she called it. And she had a following from all over the country. People would come every summer to come and see her in Cape May. And and she really was. And the Chalfont was like, a mid-19th century hotel. It's still there. It's got this huge wraparound porch, and they do this enormous Sunday dinner, which she loved because you had to dress up.
Yes.
She loved to dress up. La Dolce Vita, she did something like 30 costume changes.
I don't think it was quite that much, but it felt like
it was insane. She was just like, how are you? Anyway, and so she would invite us when we were working down there. She would invite us to Sunday dinner, and you had to wear a collared shirt and long pants. And women had to wear a skirt, like it was very, which she loved, and it just, I don't know, it makes me think of her and how,
absolutely. And I remember sitting on the beach with her because she would do a lot of writing of her shows, as I did. Those were the very early days of 1812 as well, and so we would sit and riff with each other and kind of trade jokes and give each other jokes for acts. And I just remember when she was writing. Shut Up and Kiss Me, which was her it was about bombshells, was how to be a bombshell. She had this whole thing about going to college as a bombshell, and you could get your BFA, which stood for something, and an MFA, which stood for something, but then you could go, if you were really good, you could get your PhD, which stood for pay for the whole thing, Daddy.
Is that where she had that line? And I don't know if she wrote it or not, but I'm fresh, like a flower that's fresh and ripe for the picking. I'm just out of high school and ready for Bryn Mawr College.
No, that is actually,
I messed it up.
I know, it's going very well. No, that is actually a Belle Barth joke, which is, she would tell these little poems, and she had one, roses are red and ripe for the plucking. I'm done with high school and ready for Bryn Mawr College.
Right, sorry.
So,
but she liked that.
So I'm actually going to talk and share some of the work, because for me, oddly, Jolene I have so many memories of Jolene, but so many of them are tied up in my memories of and my experiences with Phyllis Diller, which sounds strange, but I'm just going to share this story of how these two sort of extraordinary and wild women came together for me. So Mondo Manja was actually a show that 1812 produced twice.
The first time we did that.
The first time we did it, it was the first time that we were able to go to a 3-show season, and then we produced it a second time, and it was the first time we were able to go to a 4-show season. And she really, it was extraordinary. So Jolene and I then, also in Cape May, we did the Kathy and Mo show, which was also known as Parallel Lives. And it was the first time we had worked together. We'd been sort of orbiting each other, but we'd never performed together. And we jokingly used to say that it was because we were too busy being we were both sidekicks at 5 feet tall and at 6'2". She was always the comic sidekick to a leading lady, and I was always this comic sidekick. So it was the first time that the sidekicks came together, and we had such a good time. That's where Patsy was born. I could never do the South Philly accent. Jolene could do it perfectly, and
she's Peg, God rest her soul.
She was Peg, God rest her soul. And so we would sit and we would riff together as Peg and Patsy, and we would sit out on the porch in our house at Cape May and just do this. And she would speak beautifully as Peg in the South Philly accent, and I would go because I was still doing vowels, right? And but we sort of fell in love with each other that summer, and we were like, okay, this is instant comedy. Let's build something, let's do something. And I had been doing research for like Crazy Like Wow, which was a show we did about the 1950s. And I had found this interview with Phyllis Diller where she talked about how it was so important to her, ladylike behavior was so important to her. And I was like, Phyllis Diller, ladylike behavior? And she said, on stage you do whatever you want, but backstage you must always be a lady, always a lady. So Jolene and I talked, and we were like, okay, this feels like the genesis of a way of exploring women in comedy, in a very specific, through a very specific lens. Because if you look at the rules of ladylike behavior, most of our favorite comedians, including Phyllis Diller, broke those rules. And all of the women that we grew up sort of idolizing lived in the same world that we did, which is like, if you're going to be a comedian as a woman, and this has changed certainly, but early on it was like you were a comedian because you were too tall, or you were too short, or you were too fat, or you were too skinny, or you were too loud, or your mouth was too big, or your hair was too red, or your, what have you, you were too something, you had an excess of something. And Jolene and I both had an excess of height in opposite directions. So we thought this is a really great way of kind of looking back at history and who are those ladies who were too extreme. So we did people like Sophie Tucker and Fanny Bryce and Marie Dressler and Eva Tanguay and Belle Barth and Pearl Williams and all the Borscht Belt ladies, and certainly Phyllis Diller. And so I had never, like I said, if you don't know who Phyllis Diller is, Google her. She was, many say, the first female stand-up who did straight stand-up, no singing. And she's kind of extraordinary. She wore these fright wigs. It's just she had this persona that she very much put on.
And a fake cigarette. She had she had a cigarette, a long cigarette holder, but it was like a wooden. It was just a prop.
Yeah. And she talked about the cigarette holder she talked about the cigarette holder as a way of punctuating her comedy. She said, you look at George Burns, he tells a joke and then he takes a drag on his cigar. Other people have like boom, and that's what the rim shot does, right? But it's the punctuation on a joke that
you watch Jim Gaffigan, he waggles the mic, like he goes, here's my punchline. Like when it's amazing.
So for her, it was a way of going like, so here's my joke, boom. And she also had her outrageous laugh, which she would do and that was its own punctuation, right? That's its own rim shot. And so Jolene and I studied this. Also, she very much made herself into, she was actually quite curvaceous, Phyllis Diller, but she would bind her breasts and wear the most unflattering outfits so that she could so that she could do small breast jokes. She would wear go-go boots that hit her ankle at the exact place where it would make her legs look the skinniest and most bird-like. And in some ways, she was doing sort of like what, the opposite of what. So Phyllis Diller was going like, okay, here's what I look like, here's who I am. I'm now going to make myself into this persona so I can make fun of myself. In ways that in some ways Jolene did the opposite with.
She leaned into it. She would wear big heels.
Yes,
and
exactly. And so she would go out and she would say, I am the 6-foot redhead Amazon from hell whom all men desire. And anything that anybody had told her was a deficit in her, she turned into a positive.
There's a bit of like drag queen thing with, that she kind of, and not surprisingly, she was enormously popular in the drag community. The Big Mess Orchestra, she was the star of their show every year that raised money for AIDS. And like there were, Carlotta Tendent and Hey Would You Blow Me and a lot of like drag performers. And she was like the queen of drag performers because it's a similar thing of like declaring, I am fabulous and therefore I am fabulous. And like, I mean,
And so it was really interesting. And one of the things that at the beginning of Always a Lady, she and I each had a little thing that we talked about, like who we were when we were younger and what we wanted and why comedy and why us. And I guess I'll read both of them because so mine was this, in the 1970s, there was a TV Guide cover with Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett on it. I was very young, and I don't think I'd even decided to be an actress yet, but I remember looking at that cover and thinking, I want to be the third redhead in that picture. They were so funny and so fearless. Of course, I also wanted to be Vivian Leigh at the time, but somehow I knew I was closer to Carol Burnett's version of Scarlett O'Hara, long curtain rod, than Vivian Leigh's. And this was Jolene's. My childhood aspiration was nothing more or less than to be an arch villainess on Batman. I saw the Bat world as a sort of moral compass, and the women on Batman, from Barbara Gordon to J. Pauline Spaghetti, had intelligence and power. Plus, they were funny. And if anyone in the world, if I couldn't be Katharine Hepburn, which let's face it, I couldn't, I wanted to be Catwoman. At least she had a sense of humor. Plus, she had hips. Amazing. Amazing.
Totally.
So, we're making the show, Always a Lady, about women in comedy, and Jilline and I talked, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to write to Phyllis Diller. I'm going to write to Phyllis Diller, and I'm going to say, I read this interview with you. I'm interested in talking with you. So I did. And this was what I wrote. April 6, 2004. Dear Miss Phyllis Diller, my name is Jennifer Childs, and I'm the Artistic Director of 1812 Productions, a Philadelphia theater company dedicated to comedy. I am writing to introduce myself and company to you and to express my interest in interviewing you for an upcoming project entitled Always a Lady. I am looking to do interviews during late July and early August. Ideally, I would love to do the interview in person. However, if you are more comfortable doing it over the phone or via email, that is fine. A week and a half later, I got her response in a hot pink envelope. And it said, when you get here, call me at the following number and we'll schedule an interview. Love, in all capital letters, Phyllis Diller. I immediately went, when we get there. Holy crap! I didn't think anybody would actually
lives in Los Angeles.
I know. So I called Jolene and I was like, okay, we have to go to Los Angeles. We have to go meet Phyllis Diller. And so I booked us 2 tickets to Hollywood, and Jolene got back to me, and she was amazing. Her email was, Dearest Jenny, an interview with Phyllis Diller, ! Whatever shall we wear? And that, of course, was hugely important as well. And so Jolene and I flew out to Los Angeles, and we rented a car, and we had $0 to do this. We were on such a shoestring. And so we'd rented from Lend a Lemon car dealership. And we went there, and the guy at the car dealership thought Jolene was cute. So he was like, you know what, ladies, I'm going to upgrade you. And he gave us a cherry red Mustang convertible. I know. And it was not, this was
it was
like
the nicest car they had.
Yeah, exactly. It was from the 90s, from the 80s of the 90s, but still fabulous. And we're like, well, you know what we have to do? We now have to go to a vintage clothing store. We have to buy big sunglasses, headscarves, and drive down the Pacific Coast Highway with the top down, which we did. And so in preparation to go meet Phyllis Diller, we were like, okay, well, ladylike. So we wore our best outfits to go meet her. And we stopped prior to, and we bought flowers and chocolates. And she said she wanted to do the meeting at her home in Brentwood. And her assistant had said she can give you about 20 minutes. I'm like, great. So we drove up, and it's a Hollywood story, driving up in her cherry red convertible. With the big gates and the buzz at the door, and the gates open, and you drive up this long circular driveway, and there we go. And we come to her house, and her assistant greets us at the door. And we walk in, and there is Phyllis Diller waiting for us, like posing almost like a picture. She's in the settee, she's sitting on the settee, and she's got an immaculate dress on, an immaculate wig. And there are 3 glasses and a bottle of champagne. And we were like, oh my God. So we sat down with Phyllis Diller, and we gave her the chocolates, we gave her the flowers, and her assistant had said, she can see you for 20 minutes. We were there for 2 hours, and we went through 2.5 bottles of champagne. And and she totally schooled us. She gave us advice on everything. It's like, this is how you build a joke. She showed us her joke file, which if anybody has seen the Joan Rivers movie Piece of Work, Joan Rivers keeps like in a card catalog, kind of from old school libraries, all these jokes. Phyllis Diller had the same. She showed us her closet with all of her wigs and all of her outfits, and she had a wall of shoes, and I lie to you not, a wall of shoes, 50 pairs of Keds. 50 pairs of Keds in every single color. Every single color. And doubles.
Don't give Lily any ideas.
And for ones that she liked, because she liked those. She is a virtuoso piano player. She actually studied music at the conservatory somewhere in Ohio, and that's what she majored in college. And so she played us a song on the piano. Okay, parenthetically, this is one of my favorite Phyllis Diller stories. In addition to doing comedy, Phyllis Diller, once she achieved a lot of notoriety, because she was a concert pianist, she would go and perform with orchestras across the country. She played Carnegie Hall.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and she would do this thing. She would be the featured soloist, and I'm dying to do this. Anyone from the Philadelphia Orchestra who's listening, please let them know I'm dying to do this once COVID is over. She would go, and the orchestra would play, and then they would say, and now our special guest soloist, Phyllis Diller. And she would come out in this ridiculous over-the-top gown, and she would turn her back to the audience, and she would unzip her gown, and she would take it off, and she was wearing the exact same gown underneath. And it was fabulous. It was an amazing way. I'm stealing that one, first of all. Have done so already. And then second, after that, she would go to sit down to the piano for her solo. And as she would go, there would be no stool for her to sit on. And she would kind of look around at the conductor, and the conductor would look awkwardly around and look at the first violinist. And the first violinist would like stand up and give their chair to Phyllis Diller. So Phyllis Diller would take the chair at the piano, but then the first violinist would look at the second violinist like, so then the second violinist would give their chair to the first
She
violinist.
wrote a clown sketch.
She wrote a clown sketch. It would go through the entire orchestra until the final, I think the timpani player had
That's
a band
amazing.
or something like that. And then she would sit down and she would play. Incredible.
That's genius.
Incredible. So she talked to us about that. She talked to us about the comedians that she learned from. And there were so many things that stood out to me at that time. But I remember her, we asked her, we were like, so is it helpful to be extreme in some way, to be too this, and we were like, especially for female comedians. And she said the word that she used was dysplastic. It helps to be dysplastic. As a woman, and especially at her time, going on stage and saying, I'm going to make you laugh, just me, was a bold, aggressive act. And Trixie Ferganza, who was a vaudeville comedian, wrote about this in the papers, about like how you make the women in the audience laugh, how you get people on your side. And Phyllis was always like, self-deprecating humor, it's not the only way to go, but it's a great way to say hello. It's a great way to level the playing field and go, and a lot of people criticized Phyllis Diller later in life for having plastic surgery and for doing self-deprecating.
Terry Gross, there was an interview on where she was doing a beautiful series on comedy about 20 years ago, and she was like, well, what do you think about the legacy of what you're saying to women? And Phyllis Diller was like, honey, I gotta work. Yeah. And people don't want to, people see a bunch of jolly, they're worried and they don't want to laugh.
Yeah. Which is what I'm worried about right now. So just so we're saying that. So, anyway, so all of this is to say, we asked about that, and she said, it's not necessary, but it helps. And she looked at Jolene and she said, see, now you're almost too pretty to be funny. Almost. And Jolene and I lost our mind. She also talked to Jolene and I about writing our own material and the importance of finding our voice. She's like, there's been double acts, 2 men, there's been double acts, male, female. She's like, I don't know if there's been a female double act, you know? And going back through history, yes, there are, and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler and all this other stuff. She's like, you need to write your own material. You need to do your own things. And so we sort of left this, well, before we left, that was just, it was such a like, throw it down for us, because we'd both been doing some of our own writing, but not, we'd also been borrowing a lot. And so it was this really great throwdown from her to go like, no, do your own thing. And we'd been there for a couple of hours. And the reason that there was a time limit on this is because she had other people coming to take her to dinner. She had some, I don't know, young producers,
like a young agent or
executives
something, yeah,
coming to take her. So the doorbell rings and her agent is like, or her assistant was like, your dinner guests are here, so we need to wrap this up. She was like, great. So she goes to the door and these 2 men come in and they're young. And one of them is wearing like a polo shirt and the other one is wearing a jacket with a shirt underneath, but no tie. And she looks at them and she suddenly becomes very cool. And she says, I'll be back in a moment. And she looks at Jolene and I, she's like, girls. And she goes into her study and we follow her. What on earth? And she's like, do you see them? Do you see how they're dressed? And I'm wearing this. And she like throws her dress up because she looked immaculate. And it was a harkening back to that
And
thing.
she dressed for dinner 3 hours before?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
she was dressed for dinner. She was dressed for the chalfont. And she was dressed like a lady.
Yeah.
And it was important that her guests be ready to receive a lady and dress to a lady's specification, and they didn't. And so Jolene and I took this and we drove back, and I don't know how much more we drank, but we were just like on fire on all of this stuff. We came back to Philadelphia, we made the show, and we were getting ready to do it, and we really wanted to use Phyllis Diller's material. So, oh no, before we left, also, I have show and tell. We asked her, Phyllis Diller's written all of these books, like Phyllis Diller's Marriage Manual.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate showing things to the camera. I don't know, that's so like 3 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, whatever, when we first started doing this, but this one is really good. Mm-hmm. We asked her to autograph it, and I don't know if you can see it, but it says, to Jennifer and Jilline, onwards and upwards, love, Phyllis Diller. And whenever Phyllis Diller signed anything, she always wrote that love in big capital exclamation, all caps. So we got back home, we did all this stuff, and I wrote to her again in November of 2004, right before we went into rehearsal. I said, dear Miss Diller, since we saw you over the summer, Jolene and I have been busily working on Always a Lady. The afternoon we spent with you greatly influenced the shape of the show, and we have taken up your challenge to create our own double act. Our goal with the section of the show that focuses on you is not to impersonate you, but to illustrate your transformation from what we call your Jabot period, explain later, to the iconic comic you are today. If this is an idea that you are amenable to, I can follow up with a list of specific jokes or pieces of routines we're interested in using. I am, of course, happy to pay you for the right to use your material. She returned this letter with the last sentence circled, saying, you are most unusual. Do anything you wish. I'm in good hands. Happy Thanksgiving. Love, Phyllis.
Amazing.
And so, again, over the moon, we did Marty Moskowing's show. We did Radio Times to talk about and promote the show. And Phyllis Diller called in, actually, and we did some of her routines for it. But so in the show, and this is something Jolene and I put together, we had a whole section, we had a Phyllis Diller section, and it was the collision of here's what people say about being a lady, and here's what Phyllis Diller did. Is there
a source material for these rules, or this is just?
Some of this is from like, what's her name with the rules?
Emily Post?
Emily Post rules. Also, there were a whole bunch of, we looked at old 1950s
Etiquette books.
Etiquette books and educational videos about how women were supposed to behave. And so some of this is from this. So Scott will be reading what was on video at the time, which was the voice of the ladies saying what was supposed to be done. And I'll be reading.
Sourced from Emily Post,
etc.
Yes, hygiene videos.
Yes, hygiene videos. That's what it was. And then I'll be reading, and Jolene and I traded these back and forth, but it was Phyllis Diller's response. So.
A lady's humor should be like a lady's choice in dress, cultivated, refined, elegant, modest, demure. A lady was made to be loved and fondled. She was certainly not made to be laughed at. But if you must indulge in comedy, remember the rules for ladylike behavior still apply. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
She's had her face lifted so many times, there's nothing in her shoes.
Never air your dirty laundry in public.
I've been asked to say a few words about my husband, Fang. How about short and cheap? Fang is so cheap. Last week he sent away for 1,500 pounds of steel wool. He's gonna knit himself a Volkswagen.
Always be modest in speech, manner, and dress.
You like my outfit? I know what you're wondering why I'm dressed like this. There's no excuse. Ladies, this is pure Jackie Gleason.
Choose your accessories as you would choose your friends. They should always be there to cheer and comfort you.
You like my necklace? I made it in bead craft. It was supposed to be therapy. Didn't come anywhere near my problems.
Your marriage is a sacred trust. Always respect your husband.
My husband. Fang. Well, what else would you call a man with a tooth 2 inches long? I met him for the first time at a party. I thought it was a cigarette. I was so drunk I tried to light it. He was so drunk he tried to smoke it.
Your body is a temple. Always respect and care for your physique.
You'll have to excuse me. I have this small chest condition. It's chronic. You know what happened to me? My Playtex living broad died of starvation. I went to the store and said to the sales clerk, "What do you have in lingerie?" She said, "More than you'll ever have." Oh, it's hard to find a negligee in my size. I wear a junior mister. If just once in my life I could throw my arms up and say, "My cup runneth over."
Ladies, please.
You know, my photographs don't do me justice. They look just like me. You know, when I go to the beach, even the tide won't come in. You know, Burt Reynolds once asked me out. I was in his room. Whatever you might look like, ladies, marry a man your own age. As your beauty fades, so will his eyesight.
Ladies, please. Loud talking is an evidence of very bad taste. Yeah.
And again, you can see the sort of like her punctuation of her own jokes. And, you know, Jolene had that and knew that instinctively when she did things. So we came back and, we came back from LA. We did the show. It was great. We were riding high and we were like, we're going to write our own stuff. We're going to make our own things. And we talked about like Peg and Patsy being a part of the show, and that was going to be a part of the double act. And then shortly after All Is a Lady closed, Jolene got very sick. She had had breast cancer before, and it had metastasized. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to make anything better. I'm somebody who likes to always be able to fix things. And so I did the only thing that I knew how to do. I wrote to Phyllis Diller. On February 23rd, 2005, "Dear Miss Diller, I am writing to ask for one more favor. My partner Jolene, the tall one, has been fighting breast cancer for the last 2 years. I know you're a very busy woman, but if you have time. So then a week later, Jolene passed away. But several days after that, a package from Phyllis Diller arrived at her house. It was a photo and a get well letter with the handwritten message. Please get well as soon as you're able. We need your bed sheet for the dining room table. Love, Phyllis Diller. And so it was this journey with her. I think about Jolene, I think about Phyllis Diller in that same way. She had done a production of Mondo Manja in the fall of that year of 2004. And then we'd done Always a Lady at the end of 2004. And then, so I've been very privileged to spend the last several months with her. And at the end, she knew that it was a short-term thing. And so she said, Jenny, I want to do something. I want to do something for other artists, and I want to make it possible for other artists to find their voices the way that I found my voice, through solo performance. And so after she passed, her father very generously, her family very generously said, you want to set something up at 1812? In lieu of flowers, send gifts here. And the community was incredibly generous, and we established this program, the Jolene Ringel Solo Performance Program. And there are two arms of it. One is something we call the Couple Extra Bucks Fund, which was very much a part of her dad's heart. You know, whenever Jolene would do a show someplace, she would also often need just a couple extra bucks to make it happen, you know.
Her dad used to hang her lights.
Yes, amazing. And so for a couple extra bucks fund, how that functions is that people, artists apply if they have a production of their solo show already scheduled, and they just need a couple extra bucks, and they're micro grants from $500 to $1,500, and we give money to them, and it's for anything from like, I need to make up flyers.
I need to rent a soundboard.
I need to pay a stage manager. I need a fabulous costume, those kind of things. And then the other is the Jolene Ringel residencies, summer residencies at 1812. And initially our goal had been to do these residencies in Cape May. But if anybody knows how to find
cheap real
estate in Cape May over the summer, who's willing to donate it, please let me know. We can start having them there, because that's where she developed so many shows. But instead, and it's such a gift, they happen in our studio at the 1812 offices, and it is a week over the summer. People apply, and it really is for the development of a solo performance. And we host 3 to 4 solo residents each year with a collaborator. And
all women, yes.
All women. When it started, it was not all women, but over the years, the advisory board made the determination that it was an opportunity to further support the voices of women, and which was something that was also very close to Jolene's heart. Whereas 1812 is an all-comedy theater company, the solo residents, the pieces that they're working on do not have to be all comedy. They can be any format, and it's everything from cabaret to spoken word to straight up theater performances or productions, etc. But it really is about supporting the next step in their development. And because it was so important to Jolene, food, you know, in Mondo Manja, she talks about how when you smell certain things, food, you know, all of the important conversations happen in the kitchen, you know, and solo performance can be a very lonely thing. And so one of the features of the program is that everybody eats together. So, for example, on a Tuesday, artist number 1 might be working in the morning in the studio, and artist number 2 is working in the afternoon. But during lunchtime, we're all together, and we're eating and we're talking, and it allows for what one of our solo artists used to call conversational dramaturgy about your own show, because you find out a lot about from talking about the work that you're creating with other people. It helps you solidify things sometimes. Other times it's just an opportunity to hang out, have a really great time, hear what other artists and be inspired by
from all over the country.
Well, this was the first year. Last year, 2019, was the first year that we had an out-of-town resident. We don't have housing for Jilline residents at present, and this was somebody who could provide her own housing. So we had somebody from Wisconsin come, which was an amazing thing. And you know, when we first started doing this, everybody knew who Jolene was. And over the years, over the past 15 years, slowly but surely, it's more and more artists who have moved to Philly who Jolene is not a part of, who don't know who Jolene is. And that's, so that also has been a really wonderful opportunity at the beginning of each of these residencies to kind of come in and tell her story and to bring her into the room and to bring her spirit into the room. Because the other part of Jolene is that she was incredibly generous, not just with her time of like, hey, Jolene, I'm working on something. Yeah, I'll come and sit and watch what you're doing and I'll give you feedback.
For our wedding present, she gave us all 17 volumes because she bought them from, oh no, it was Lily.
Lily.
That's right. It was, yeah.
For Lily.
She all 17 volumes of the Oxford English Dictionary that she had like collected, you know, on eBay and like had, yeah.
No.
Right. She started collecting when we got married. That was what it was.
That's right.
There was also the story that you told me that there was a person with whom she went to college that was very sick and was unable to, you know, not strong enough to walk to class, and Jolene literally carried this person on her back to class. And
she would also, it would just be stuff like, you know, Jomar. Jolene introduced me to Jomar. She introduced me to so many things.
She would just show up at our house with gowns.
Yes.
Like she was like, I was shopping, I got you these 5 things.
Exactly. And Franny, who was her grandmother, was a much shorter person. So I think all of her short friends have a Franny dress in
half the 1812 costume stock was from Jolene.
From Jolene. And that kind of generosity, that kind of generosity of spirit, as well as actual also financial generosity, was something that was just really ingrained in who she was. And it's that spirit of generosity that continues this program. And that, you know, when we couldn't host the residencies this year, the advisory board was like, let's take the money that we would have spent on that and let's give it to some of the residents, because people need that funding, need that support. And so that to me is really, in some ways, it's some of the most exciting work that we do, because it is not an 18, I don't even know how to say it. It's like, it's not me going like, here's the things that I'm deciding we should think about for our season. It is truly the voices of these individual artists going like, this is what I gotta say in the world right now. And that's really exciting. It's always an exciting time in the 1812 office. It's everybody's a buzz. And while it feels like it's a very busy time in our office and it's a very busy time for us while it's going on, it's also just by its nature a very quiet program. And we're going to be doing more fundraising for it, and we're going to be doing more talking about it and talking about like, how does this program, at this time when the voices of individual artists are really necessary, how does that live more in the 1812 world? So all of these will be topics of conversation.
Right, topics of conversation. So we're having former Jolene residents on as our continued programming.
Yes, for the next month. And what time is it, Lily? Where are we?
6:50.
Oh my gosh, we've been talking
Way
for
long.
so long. We're so long. Oh my gosh. So at any rate, it's time to say goodnight. Holy crap, I didn't me and my mouth. Anyway, it's good people to spend time with. So we're gonna say goodnight because we gotta go eat dinner and you gotta go eat dinner. But over the next month, we're going to have former Jolene residents on to talk about their work, their art, the pieces that they worked on. We've got Bijan No coming up next week. We've got T.S. Hawkins coming up in a couple weeks, and we will share the schedule as it is finalized. We also will be sharing video of Jolene. Our video just from that time in our productions is just not that great, so we're looking for the best things that we can share. In the meantime, you can Google her. She's got on YouTube. There's some really wonderful performances of hers with the Big Mess Orchestra at the Truck. And in the meantime, be kind to each other, be kind to yourselves, but mostly be kind to each other. Be generous with each other, and we'll see you next week.
Look at that.
It's going very well.
It's going very well.